Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by the Hypele Lodge. The Lodge is open again for weekend business as they gear up for their full spring reopening. If you want a true resort experience in the mountains by a rushing river, suites and cabins available, the Hypele Lodge is for you.
Our world.
Hello, Lou. This is Charlie Donovan of the Cleveland Indians. How would you like to manage the Indians this year?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? This is a chance to manage in the big leagues.
Let me think it over, will you, Charlie? I got a guy on the other line about some white walls. I'll talk to you later.
If you don't understand what that clip has to do with Tennessee football, you haven't been keeping up with the defensive coordinator search. There are guys out there who would rather talk to a guy on the phone about a set of white walls than take the defensive coordinator job at Tennessee, it appears. Gentlemen, I don't care that the search takes forever. I said last week, I don't care how long it takes, find the right guy. You're in no rush at this point. However, the fact that you are having to take it to so many people is a different deal. You may still, hit bingo. You may land on the roulette wheel with a good spin with the right guy, but the fact that you are approaching linebacker coaches and offering them more than $1.5 million type dollars per year, 3-year contracts, and they're saying, "No, I'm good as a linebacker coach. I'm fine as is." That to me, very, very worrisome.
I would agree, but you can take comfort in this. Tennessee, when they hire somebody, is going to say he's the only one they offered it to.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And what they're doing is, and I've had multiple people say it, it's like, if we offer you a 3-year contract for $1.5 million, will you take the job? And so then they think about it, and then they end up saying no. So, well, we didn't offer it to him. So you got that semantics going on with Tennessee right now. But I think there's several issues as to why this is not a very good job. And I think that's one reason they have gone through at least 6 or 7 candidates that have declined it so far.
I mean, so let's just run through some of the guys. Matt House, Kansas City Chiefs. Casey Rogers, former Vol. He's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You look at these NFL guys, just on a side note, there would be no reason for them to come back to Tennessee. I mean, if you get somebody, I'll be amazed. But usually those guys they'll go to Alabama. You've got multiple guys at Alabama right now because they know with Nick Saban, we'll just jump right back to the league. You come to Tennessee, especially to be defensive coordinator with this offensive system at a school that nobody succeeds at, you may never get back to the NFL. If you're Casey Rogers, you will have wasted 16 years. You may have to start at the bottom rung in the NFL instead of being Todd Bowles' right-hand man. So you look at those guys, the NFL guys that were mentioned. Blake Baker, LSU, linebackers coach. Al Washington, linebackers coach, Ohio State. Some of the others. There's been discussion of Josh Conklin, former UT defensive backs coach under Derek Dooley for 1 year.
He's at Wofford, head coach there.
Head coach
and their
at
season
Wofford.
begins next weekend.
Right, and he just hired a guy this past week from Pitt where he was his defensive coordinator.
And he was interested in the job, by the way.
Yeah.
They never offered it to him, though, I don't think. There was Orlando.
Todd Orlando.
The guy at Louisville.
Yeah, Brian Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? So it's gone on and on and on at this point. Where does this thing stand? I mean, anybody have any ideas?
Well, to your point on Casey Rogers, I think Casey Rogers is kind of tied to Todd Bowles, who I think is going to be a head coach next year in the NFL. And Casey Rogers was his defensive coordinator with the Jets, so I think that's going to happen. The name that I'm hearing to watch for is Tim Banks. He's an assistant coach at Penn State. He's a co-defensive coordinator. He's been a defensive coordinator at Illinois. That's a name to watch for. But my goodness, I don't know where this roulette rule is going to end up.
We've been saying for years, guys, that this job gets worse and worse. And people, it's a little like, and we've all known this, people who will say, "Oh, look how beautiful my baby is." And they show you the hinge of the phone, and you look at the picture, and you have to go, "It's a wolf baby." People do this because they love the baby. They don't realize that it's ugly. They don't realize that it can't sing. "Oh, Timmy's a great singer. Listen." Oh, God. That's Vol fans. They see UT, they love UT, they don't see the problems. It's like, well, you must not be spending enough. You're offering $1.5 million to a linebacker coach who's saying, no, it's not the money at this point. The reality is this job has gotten worse with each of these firings. It is, whereas Alabama is the Cape Canaveral of launching pads. This place is a potter's field of coaching graveyards. So I think right now it's just incredibly radioactive. And then the added twist is, for a defensive coordinator, you're going to have to be handcuffed to an offense that plays faster than in America. I think it's a radioactive gig right now.
Yeah, and I think if you pull that Major League clip back up, and the gentleman on the other line who's saying, what do you mean you have to think about it? I think Josh Heupel's probably sitting there thinking, what do you mean I can offer 7 figures to be a defensive coordinator at Tennessee? And to this point, nobody has wanted it. That has to be a surprise. Josh Hypele knows the history of Tennessee. I bet when taking the job, he thought, I'm going to have these resources. I can go get somebody. And you're right, it ultimately matters, do you get the right guy? But what you also want is for the head coach to get his guy, and he's not been able to do that.
I think there are 3 things that make this, and you've kind of touched on it, that make it tough right now. You got the NCAA cloud over your head.
Yeah, that's a big one.
You also have the personnel. Tennessee's had so many people into the transfer portal. Who are you going to have on defense? And the other one is Heupel's offense. I think those would be 3 things that would really scare defensive coordinators away.
Yeah, and then you also throw in the fact that coaches come here and don't succeed. I mean, look at, I started to do this and I thought it would take too long, but I started to look at how many coaches have come here and left with better gigs, and then compare that to Ohio State or Alabama. That's night and day. I mean, you see guys that have to start from scratch after here, and I'm not just talking about head coaches.
And that can be an issue. Some of these coaches are probably calling other coaches, what do you think about if I take this job? If you're Al Washington, you're 36 years old, you're a rising star in the profession. Is Tennessee the right path to get you where you want to go? I'll bet he was met with some pushback, probably at Ohio State, starting there. Hey, this is not how you get to where you want to go. But I think they're calling other coaches too and asking those questions.
I think you hit on something. Josh Hypele probably didn't know what I don't think he knew what he was getting into, or he wouldn't have taken the job, personally. I think he should have looked at how he got the job and realized, I wouldn't have been in this job if this weren't a tough sell. Maybe that should have tipped him off to what the D coordinator search was going to be. But personally, when they took it, I don't think Danny White or Josh Hypele had any clue what they were stepping into. And I don't mean that as an insult to them, but
it's a statement on the position. Doesn't mean they can't succeed. I think it's been a wake-up call over the last few weeks of what the challenges are at Tennessee. The
brand needs to be polished, right? They just didn't realize how much polish was necessary.
Yeah.
For this brand.
There are others. We'll leave it there and come back. When we come back, I want to talk about who Josh Hypele has hired. And also, is Danny White too involved in this defensive coordinator search? That rumor is out there. Come on back on the Sports Source.